"Look over there, boys. That's Captain Kidd, still watching from above." The sailors pointed and laughed nervously as their ship moved along the River Thames. High above the dark, dirty water of London's harbour, a skeleton hung in an iron cage. It slowly moved back and forth in the wind. Old, ripped clothes still stuck to the white bones. Dry strands of hair blew in the air, looking like seaweed. The jaw of the skull was open, almost like it was smiling forever at everyone who passed by. This horrifying skeleton wasn't from just any common criminal. This was William Kidd, the man who was once a hero of the English Royal Navy, then became the most hated pirate in the empire, and now, 2 years after his execution, he continued to rot publicly as the most macabre warning in English naval history. Welcome to the story of the captain who died twice, first as a hero, then as a skeleton. The transformation of William Kidd from national hero to public skeleton began in the year 1695, when the English government offered him the most dangerous mission on the seas, hunt pirates. But to understand how he ended up swaying in a cage over the Thames, we need to know the man behind the most sinister legend in piracy. Kidd was born in Scotland around the year 1655. Son of a Calvinist minister who taught him that the world was divided between God's chosen and those condemned to hell. This strict religious upbringing would profoundly shape his personality. Kidd always believed he was on the right side of any conflict, even when evidence suggested otherwise. While still young, he immigrated to New York, where he established himself as a prosperous merchant and respected ship captain. During King William's War in the early 1690s, Kidd commanded private vessels that attacked French ships in the name of the English crown. He was technically a legal privateer, a government licensed pirate to rob England's enemies. It was this reputation as an efficient privateer that caught the attention of Richard Coote, Earl of Bellamont, and the new colonial governor of New York. Bellamont had received direct orders from London to solve the pirate problem that was devastating English maritime trade in the Indian Ocean. Pirates like Henry Avery and Thomas Tew were stealing fortunes from merchant ships, especially those returning from India loaded with spices, silk, and gold. The solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Hire a former pirate to hunt active pirates. Kidd would receive an official letter of marque authorizing him to capture any pirate ship and split the spoils with his investors, a group that included some of the most powerful men in England, including the Lord of the Admiralty himself. In the year 1696, Kidd departed from London commanding the Adventure Galley, a frigate specially equipped with 34 cannons and 150 carefully selected crew members. His mission was clear: sail to the Indian Ocean, capture famous pirates like Avery, and return with their treasures to enrich the investors and the crown. But the reality of 17th century seas was much more complex than orders written in London. In the Indian Ocean, the line between legal privateer and criminal pirate was extremely thin. Captains changed sides constantly, depending on opportunities and pressures, and Kidd would soon discover that hunting pirates was infinitely harder than becoming one. The first months of the mission were disastrous. Kidd sailed for almost a year without encountering a single significant pirate ship. His crew, promised rich rewards, began to grow impatient and hostile. Worse still, many of his men were former pirates who knew the waters and knew where to find easy prey. Defenseless merchant ships instead of armed pirates. The pressure on Kidd was immense. His investors expected profits, his crew demanded action, and he himself faced bankruptcy if he returned empty-handed. It was in this desperate context that Kidd began making decisions that would transform him from hunter to hunted. The decisive moment came in the year 1697, when Kidd captured the Qua Merchant, an Armenian ship sailing with French passes. Technically, the capture was legal. France and England were at war and the ship carried French documents. But the Qua Merchant also transported goods belonging to Indian merchants under the protection of the Grand Mogul, the Muslim emperor who controlled India. The capture created a massive diplomatic incident. The Grand Mogul, furious with what he considered piracy against his subjects, threatened to expel all English merchants from India, an economic disaster that would cost millions to the East India Company. Suddenly, Kidd was no longer a national hero hunting pirates. He was a political problem that needed to be eliminated. The transformation of the narrative was brutal and immediate. London newspapers that once celebrated Kidd as terror of the pirates now denounced him as the most dangerous pirate on the seas. His name was included in official wanted criminal lists. A reward was offered for his capture. The hunter had officially become the hunted Kidd. Sailing in distant waters took months to fully understand his new situation. When he finally returned to the Caribbean in the year 1699, he discovered he was a marked man. He tried to negotiate with colonial authorities, offering to return part of the treasure in exchange for pardon, but the orders from London were clear. Kidd must be arrested and sent for trial. The arrest happened in Boston in the year 1700 when Kidd was betrayed by Earl Bellomont himself, the very man who had originally given him the mission. Bellomont, trying to save his own political career, arrested Kidd on charges of piracy and murder. The former hero was chained and shipped on a vessel to London, where he would face trial for his life. Kidd's trial in the year 171 was one of the greatest legal sensations of the era. All of Los Indon followed the case through pamphlets and newspapers. Kidd defended himself, arguing that he had acted under official orders and that his captures were legal according to his letters of marque. But crucial documents that could prove his innocence mysteriously disappeared from government archives. The inconvenient truth was that many of the most powerful men in England had invested in Kidd's mission and now needed a scapegoat to explain the diplomatic disaster with India. Kidd was conveniently sacrificed to protect more important reputations and commercial interests. The verdict was inevitable: guilty of piracy and murder. The sentence was death by hanging at execution dock, the traditional place where pirates were executed in the tidal zone of the river Thames. But the authorities had special plans for Kidd. His execution would be only the beginning of his punishment. On the morning of May 23rd in the year 171, a crowd of thousands gathered at Execution Dock to witness the end of England's most infamous pirate. Kidd climbed the gallows, maintaining his innocence, claiming to be a victim of political conspiracy. His last words were a warning to all sailors who let themselves be led by evil men. The first hanging attempt was dramatically failed. The rope broke and Kidd fell alive onto the muddy ground. The crowd interpreted this as a divine sign of innocence, but the authorities simply put on a new rope and hanged Kidd a second time. This time it worked, but death was only the beginning of the true punishment. Kidd's body was covered with tar for preservation and placed in a special iron cage known as a gibbet. This cage was suspended over the Thames waters at Tilbury Point, where all ships entering or leaving London were forced to pass. The location was deliberately strategic. Every sailor navigating to London would see Kidd's body swaying over the waters. The message was clear. This is the fate of pirates. For months, the body slowly decomposed under sun, rain, and wind, creating a macabre spectacle that terrorized and fascinated observers. Contemporary accounts describe the progressive deterioration in horrifying detail. First, the clothes rotted and fell off. Then the flesh began to separate from the bones, creating a nauseating stench that could be smelled for miles around. Seabirds tore off pieces of flesh, accelerating the decomposition process. Captain William Dampier, famous explorer, wrote in the year 172, "We passed poor Kidd's gibbet today, little remains beyond bones and hair." His pirate clothes have become black rags that dance in the wind like war flags. It is a sight that will haunt my dreams. For 2 complete years, Kidd's skeleton remained suspended over the Thames. Its presence became part of London's geography. Sailors used the gibbet as a navigation reference point. "We passed Kidd at noon" was a common phrase in ship logs of the era. The body's display had a profound psychological effect on the maritime community. Young men who dreamed of pirate adventures saw Kidd's skeleton and reconsidered their ambitions. Captains used the site as a moral lesson for rebellious crews. The skeleton became a more effective symbol against piracy than any military campaign. But ironically, the prolonged display also transformed Kidd into a romantic figure. Popular ballads told his story as a victim of political injustice. Legends about buried treasures began to circulate. After all, where was the gold from the Qua merchant? Dead Kidd became more famous than living Kidd. The final removal of the skeleton happened only in the year 173, when authorities decided the lesson had been sufficiently learned. The bones were discreetly buried in an undisclosed location, officially ending the macabre spectacle. But the image of Kidd's skeleton swaying over the Thames was already engraved in English collective memory. The empty gibbet remained as a landmark until it was finally removed decades later. But for generations, sailors continued pointing to the spot and telling the story of the captain who became a skeleton. Kidd's legend had transcended his physical death. Today, when we study William Kidd's history, we see a man destroyed by the moral ambiguity of his era. Sent by the government to hunt pirates, he was sacrificed by the same government when his actions became politically inconvenient. His post-mortem punishment was more extreme than any crime he may have committed. The Kidd case also reveals how authorities used psychological terror to control populations. The spectacle of public decomposition wasn't just punishment, it was political theater designed to discourage unwanted behaviors. The state had transformed a corpse into an instrument of propaganda. The final irony is that Kidd probably never was the monstrous pirate that authorities portrayed. Evidence suggests he was more a victim of political circumstances than a deliberate criminal, but his reputation was deliberately destroyed to serve greater interests. Kidd's skeleton over the Thames remains as one of the most powerful symbols of how justice can become injustice when serving political interests. A man was not only executed but humiliated post-mortem to send a message to others. William Kidd departed from London as a national hero hunting pirates. He returned as a condemned pirate, and he ended as a skeleton swaying over the muddy waters of the Thames, serving as a macabre warning to all sailors who dared defy the Empire's power. But perhaps the true lesson of Kidd's story isn't about piracy. It's about how governments can transform heroes into villains when convenient, and how death is sometimes only the beginning of true punishment.